Hello and welcome again to City Talk, a production of the Leavenworth Lansing Cable Channel 2. This is another in our series of programs which demonstrate to our public and to potential sponsors of government programming in our viewing area the possibilities for use of Cable Channel 2. Our goal with the use of the City Talk program and the facilities of the Kansas City, Kansas Community College is to inform the public about government functions and government activities in carrying out those functions. In support of that theme, today we are talking with our guest, who is Chief Judge David King. Welcome, David.
Thank you, John.
Judge King, who is the Chief Judge for the 1st Judicial District, which includes Leavenworth and Atchison counties, has consented to be with us today to talk about what I think is probably a very, very significant step in the administration of justice and in the performing of the judicial function in our community. Anyone who's observed anything in our community will have noticed the completion or near completion of the new Justice Center at 3rd and Walnut Streets in Leavenworth. And we're doing this program in conjunction with the opening of that facility, which I understand is scheduled for June the 3rd. Is that correct, Judge?
That's correct.
Judge King, what I'd like to do first is let our audience know a little bit about you and about our court system, if I could. Tell us, first of all, how long have you been Chief Judge of the 1st Judicial District?
I've been the Chief Judge of the 1st Judicial District since Judge Harmon retired, which was in 1990 or 91. I'm not sure exactly. I'd been on the district bench for 4 years prior to that.
All right, and what are the functions of the Chief Judge?
Well, the Chief Judge formal responsibilities are to make the docket assignments to the other judges in the district, and my responsibility is to divide the workload among the 6 judges in the district as evenly as possible, so that all judges ideally would have an equal workload, so that the work can be processed in an orderly and an efficient way. I have supervisory authority over all the non-judicial staff of the district court, responsibility for preparing the operating budget for the district court, and relations information and the like with the public, such as programs as this.
Let me back up and ask you some basic questions here. You say there's 6 judges in our district?
That's correct.
Where are they located?
The 6 judges, we have 4 judges who are assigned to hear cases only in Leavenworth. 2 judges hear cases in Atchison County. They also have a docket assignment in Leavenworth to help out because the difference in the population and the case filings between the 2 counties is such that it requires more than 4 judges work in Leavenworth.
So you have 6 judges, at least all of them are part-time in Leavenworth.
Correct.
And 4 of them are full-time, is that
Correct.
right? And is that reflective of the percentage of filings in Leavenworth versus Atchison?
Roughly.
Roughly.
It's not an exact science, and there are other considerations that go into that decision, but essentially that's a rough division of the work.
My general recollection is that somewhere in the vicinity of 85% of the cases are filed in Leavenworth County. Is that true?
That may be a little high. I'd say, depending on what type of case, it's probably 65 to 75, somewhere in there.
All right. We've had a courtroom or courtrooms. I think we have four courtrooms in the old courthouse, did we not?
We had 3 courtrooms and a law library that was converted temporarily into a small courtroom that we've used for the last 5 or 6 years.
And the problem was that we had 6 judges trying to operate out of 3.5 courtrooms?
Well, initially we had 4 judges who were hearing cases, and that necessitated, with the addition of a 5th judge for the district in 1995, that necessitated another courtroom for use. And given the space limitations in the old courthouse, we went to the county commission and made a proposal to convert the existing law library into a small hearing room as a temporary measure to be able to meet the needs of the court, and that's what we've used since then.
Now, Judge, when I came to Leavenworth to practice law 35 years ago, we had 3 employees in the clerk's office.
A lot has changed since then, hasn't it, John?
Seems like it. How many do you have now?
There are 12 staff members in the clerk's office, plus the chief clerk, and then the judges have support staff as well. We have a total of 4 administrative assistants, 3 administrative assistants, and court reporters that the judges share. Those are divided among the various judges.
So the total is somewhere about, what, 23 or 4?
Yes, that'd be
roughly correct.
Right.
Not an exact science.
Well, it could be. Should be.
Why, what I'm trying to lead into is the need for the new Justice Center. Back in 1995, as I recall, after some discussion, the county commissioners agreed with the concept of appointing an advisory committee to study this. Why don't you tell our audience what occurred in 1995 and finally led to the approval of the sales tax referendum?
Well, it actually began sometime sooner than, or sometime before 1995. There had been a long-standing need for new jail for Leavenworth County. There had also been a long-standing need for improvement in the court facilities. In 1986 or 1988, the Office of Judicial Administration, which is the judicial administrative arm of the Kansas Supreme Court, came in and made an assessment of the court facilities in Leavenworth and determined that they were inadequate at that time. But it was some years after that, obviously, before actual planning and implementation of a new court facility began. But in 1995, a committee of the Leavenworth Bar Association, which you were a member, and I believe Bob Beal also was a member, and I don't recall who else, made a presentation to the county commission at that time reflecting the need for a new court facility or improvement of the court facilities. And the recommendation was to appoint a task force to make a comprehensive study not only of the court needs but of the law enforcement needs as well as the new need for a new jail, and to try to make a coordinated and a comprehensive study of the needs and then come to a solution that would be appropriate.
As I recall, you participated in that study yourself, did you not?
I was a member of that task force, yes.
How many people served on that roughly, do you recall?
I believe it was between 20 and 25 people. It was a citizens task force. You had people that were involved, obviously, in the affected public agencies, but there were a number of citizens who volunteered a number of hours to those meetings and the study of the situation.
Eventually, what happened as a result of that?
The task force made a recommendation to the county commission regarding the needs. There was a needs assessment done and proposals made, and at that point the city and county governments in Leavenworth County engaged in a cooperative effort to try to make that plan a reality, and it was determined that the recommendation of the task force should be implemented, and for the most part it has been.
As I recall, when the actual referendum to approve a 1-cent sales tax took place, the goal was to raise enough money to construct a facility costing approximately $23.5 million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When there was an implementation committee after the election, favorable results of that election, is that correct?
Yes, I think it was called the Building Committee.
All right, and you were a member
I was
of that?
not a member of that.
You were not a
committee,
member?
no.
I assume you advised them from time to time about the needs of the courts?
The needs of the courts had more or less been set out by the task force, and at that point there had been a planning study done prior to the election by an architect, and the architect had made a recommendation of what was needed to make a reality out of the needs that had been identified by the task force.
Why, Judge King, why don't you let's talk about the objectives that the task force identified. In other words, what problems were we trying to solve with this new facility as far as the courts are concerned?
Well, the determination that we made in studying the court facilities is it wasn't just a space problem. The space problem was a very serious one that was inhibiting our ability to perform our work. But we also found that the design of the building that we were working in was not conducive to working in the most efficient and productive manner. So we wanted to try to get into a design that would eliminate that obsolescence of function of the court. So it was a space problem, but also a design problem that was inhibiting the way we work. One of the most important considerations that I think that we discovered and wanted addressed was the security issue. For years, prisoners were brought to the courtroom from the county jail through the public areas of the courthouse, brought up the public elevator through the rotunda on the second floor where the public would be gathered, and then brought into the courtrooms. The courtrooms had no holding facilities. We used either the jury room or the jury box as a holding facility for prisoners, and this was a situation that was just unacceptable.
In addition to being a security problem for the sheriff's office, it was a security problem for the courts as well. Is that right?
For the public.
And as I recall, you didn't really have bailiffs or independent security facilities at all in the courts. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. The sheriff's deputies were required to accompany them to the court and then act as security while they were there.
Why, you've mentioned the design and the space issue. As I indicated, using that old courthouse facility at one point, it accommodated 3 people in the clerk's office versus 12 plus additional people. Does the new plan accommodate that space need?
We didn't operate from a blank sheet of paper, so to speak, in what we needed. We could make projections as far as what our existing case load was and how much work can be processed by an employee on average, and also could make accurate projections about the case growth, and that's because the state of Kansas keeps large volumes of statistical information about case filings and types of cases in the courts. And what we did is made a projection into the future based on past case growth to make a determination of what our anticipated future needs would be. Then once we did that, the National Center for State Courts has reference materials available on, with this many employees you need this many square feet of workspace and the type of workspace that you will need to perform the judicial functions. And we relied on that information to make our recommendations about the space that we would need. The National Center for State Courts also is of a great assistance in the design of court facilities into secure areas, public areas, and private areas, or areas that the public does not have direct access to. And the building was designed with those considerations in mind.
And do you think that those recommendations of the National Center were pretty much adhered to by our architects?
I believe so as far as the security matters. Inmates will come directly from the jail into a holding area in the courtroom or adjacent to the courtrooms with never having gone through any public areas. There is a secure corridor that is above the courtrooms that will bring the inmates down into the holding facility, which is just as secure as a jail cell that is adjacent to the courtrooms. And so prisoners will be brought into the courtroom never having gone through a public area, and that is, I think, one of the great accomplishments of the new Justice Center. In addition to that, there are a number of private meeting areas for attorneys to confer with their clients, and that was a great shortcoming of the old court design, as there was no area where attorneys could discuss legal matters in confidence with their clients. That is available now. Each courtroom will have an attorney conference room for both sides of the case for each courtroom. That also is an important achievement. There is a limited access to the judicial suites, or the areas where the judges have their offices and work. Right now, anyone can walk back into my office in the old courthouse. Attorneys can come in. They have business, but the public and anyone else could come in as well. We don't mean to totally isolate ourselves, but it does affect our productivity when there's that much activity. Without some area, the hallway outside the judge's offices now has been a gathering place for lawyers in between hearings, and it's a disruptive influence. And the new design is designed to, if not eliminate that, minimize that, so that it's easier for the judges to work uninterrupted in their offices, as well as our staffs. The district court clerk's office, likewise. Currently, there is pretty much free access to anyone who wants to come back into the clerk's office, and this is an interference to the work of the clerks, and they have a great challenge in trying to keep up with the volume of work that they have to process, and so some restriction on access into their work areas will be helpful. In addition, they have work carrels that each employee will work at, which will have all of their work needs at them, and I think that this will be a significant improvement in the ability to be productive for our employees.
We've talked about one of the objectives, in a general way, we've talked about one of the objectives here being to increase the capacity of the personnel that are actually employed by the court to do the work. In that regard, what is it that, what information did you have available, or did the committee have available back in 1995 when these concepts first started to gel, about what was going to be needed in terms of resources for the future?
As far as space needs, or?
Space needs, number of judges, number of courtrooms, that sort of information.
What we did is took the statistical case filing history for the prior 10 years and determined on a statewide average the number of cases that each district judge processes annually, which information is available. They have statistical information about the per judge caseload average for the state. And what we did is determined that. We also determined the Leavenworth County per judge caseload, which was higher than the state average, and then made a projection into the future at 5-year increments on out to 20 years, and 20 years was as far as we felt that we could accurately go, and determined that based on current or the historical case filing pattern, or the increase in case filings over the prior 10 years, the number of judges and non-judicial support staff that would be needed to process the increased caseload in the future. Interestingly enough, as we were doing this in 1995, we had great confidence that this was a good methodology to make accurate predictions about the future, but 5 years after this, it's remarkable how accurate the case filing growth has been as projected, and also our personnel increases. At that time, we had 5 judges in the district. We have since added a 6th judge, fortunately, to the district, which was consistent with what our projections were.
And by the way, the adding of an additional judge isn't something that just happens because you feel like you need one.
No.
But I think you have to convince the Supreme Court administrative arm, and then they have to convince the legislature. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We were very fortunate to receive a sixth judge in our district.
But that's really done based upon caseload, is it not?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing political about it, or at least very minimally political, in that you're awarded a judge when you in fact need one to carry out your function.
No, there has to be a demonstrated need for that.
Well, going back then to 1995 and the projections that we attempted to make at that time, do you remember, say 20 years down the road, how many judges and how many courtrooms and how many personnel were we looking at in Leavenworth?
Well, John, we discussed that my memory is not as good as it used to be, but as I recall, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 14 judges 20 years out. That'd be 20 years from 1995.
And I believe what we talked about there was multiple use of single courtrooms too. So, for example, for every additional judge that comes along, you don't necessarily need an additional courtroom. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. The National Center for State Courts recommends that when you achieve the level of 5 to 7 judges, that at that point it becomes feasible and sensible not to add an additional courtroom for each additional judge. There can be some sharing of judges. Interestingly, we are right at that transition phase. In many respects, the court in Leavenworth is at a transition phase from a small court to a larger court. And a large court has to operate differently than a smaller court. And a part of that includes this factor of judges being able to share courtrooms. It is being right in the transition process is a difficult process because at 6 judges it's difficult to get to utilize the sharing of courtrooms. At the same time, it's a necessary element.
Right at the present time, how many courtrooms have been built into this new facility?
There are 4 courtrooms on the top level of the building, which is the 4th level. Those are all full-sized courtrooms that are capable of trying cases to juries. On the 3rd level, which would be the floor below that, there is a municipal courtroom. It is not currently equipped to be able to try cases to juries. There's no jury box or jury deliberation area and the like. That courtroom was designed to be a shared courtroom between the district and the municipal court. It is currently being used by the municipal court.
All right, and that's being used one day a week, essentially?
Correct,
for
by the
municipal
municipal court.
So you've got 5 courtrooms currently in the building?
Correct.
What happens, Judge King, when we get another judge or two and we need more courtrooms?
Well, that was one of the other responsibilities that we asked the architect to carry out, and that was to design the building that it would be flexible for future expansion. And the design of the building was with a plan or alternatives for future expansion when the need arose. And so that has been built into the building. There are essentially 2 options. You can either expand the courts into new construction area that would be an addition to the existing Justice Center, or the other alternative would be to take other users who are occupying the 3rd level of the building now, which would be the court-related agencies, and move them into new construction, which would be a new part of the Justice Center at a point in the future, and then to redesign those or remodel the 3rd floor into 3 additional courtrooms.
And what agencies are occupying that 3rd floor at the current time?
Court Services, which is a part of the district court, Community Corrections.
What is Court Services, by the way?
Court Services would be our probation department. They supervise probationers, do home studies in domestic cases, and perform other functions for the court.
All right.
Do pre-sentence investigations on persons who are convicted of crimes. The Community Corrections is on the 3rd level. City County Probation, the Municipal Court Clerk's Office is on the 3rd level. The District Court Clerk's Office is on the 3rd level, as well as the County Attorney and all the agencies that work under his authority. That would include the Child Support Office, Victim Witness, and the like.
So what's the projection then for the staying capacity of these other agencies? Are they going to have a life expectancy in that building of 10 years, or what do you foresee?
The design of the building was initially that all agencies were to have a construction of needs 20 years into the future from the time that the task force made our recommendation. Budgetary limitations scaled that back, and all users in the building were to have facilities built for needs 10 years into the future, with the exception of the jail. And the decision was made to go ahead and maintain the 20-year future capacity in the construction of the jail. Additional budget cuts or trimming was necessitated as we went into the process, and as a part of that, the court, I believe, when we go in, will be close to our capacity rather than built for our 10-year needs.
By the way, we discussed right before the program that we would have some digital photography available to include in this presentation, and if things work out right now, there should be a photograph of the interior of one of the courtrooms on the screen. Why don't you just describe what it is that the audience is seeing when they look at the courtroom from the public entrance?
I believe this photograph is the third-level courtroom, the municipal courtroom. As you look, there's the bench area. It is designed for witness as well as a clerk to work at the bench as well as the judge. That is a multi-use. The district court ordinarily would not have a clerk that would sit at the bench. It would just be the judge and a witness that would be at that front area. But again, the design was made to be flexible to accommodate different uses. It's also possible that the Court of Appeals, which travels around the state and hears oral arguments in cases in panels of 3 judges, could use this courtroom very nicely. It's very well equipped for 3 judges to sit at that front area and hear cases.
Judge King, what about the public? Is the public accommodated in these courtrooms?
The design of the courtrooms also was to reflect adequate seating for members of the public. This courtroom was designed with high volume cases in mind. The municipal court cases involve a number of people that come to court for those cases, as well as use by the district court if we're able to work that out, where high volume dockets would be heard in that courtroom. So the seating for the public was an important design consideration that the architect was to carry out. Adequate space for the attorneys to work, to be able to sit comfortably with their clients and have all the materials that they would need to try the case are also important considerations.
And speaking of the public, is the public going to be invited to come and see these facilities in person?
Absolutely. After the formal dedication of the building on June 1st, the county will have the county and the city will have an open house to the public on June 3rd, when all areas of the Justice Center will be open for the people to come in and go through the new Justice Center.
This has been John Tillotson, Chairman of the Advisory Committee for Cable Channel 2, talking with Chief Judge David King about the new Justice Center facility in Leavenworth. Judge King, it's been a pleasure having you today.
Thank you very much, John.
I hope the city will take you up on the invitation to come and visit these facilities on June the 3rd.
I hope they will too.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.